So I'm changing up the study guide practice problems a little bit this time. Rather than having the practice problems that we've been doing that are closely related, I have written out examples or definitions that you need to understand that should allow you to know how to solve problems on the test. So, as we work through this, these are the important things for you to focus on: the terms, how we change numbers, the order that we do things. If you understand everything I've put on this study guide, then you should be well prepared for the test on Monday. So the first one here says that 6% as a decimal is. Remember that when we are taking a percentage to a decimal, we want to move the decimal point 2 spots to the left. So 6% would become 0.06. So that's the first thing. You need to understand how to change a percentage into a decimal. Next, an increase of 6% written as a decimal is. Remember when we did practice problems where we said we were doing a percent increase? We said that we needed to multiply by 1 to maintain the current amount, and then we needed to add in the increase. So if I have a 6% increase, then my growth factor would be 1.06. So you need to understand how to do this. An exponential expression has 3 parts. Every time you write an exponential expression, or any time you have to match a description to an exponential expression, remember it's made up of the starting amount all right, this is also known as the y-intercept, multiplied by the growth factor to the exponent of the input. So whether you are having to write or whether you are having to match, you need to understand that it has these 3 parts. And when you're reading the description, those are the 3 parts you need to identify. Next, there are blank months in a year. It may seem simple, but you need to understand that there are 12 months in a year. Because on problems dealing with compound interest, sometimes the compounding happens annually and sometimes it happens monthly. If growth is given monthly, but the question wants the answers in years, we calculate the exponent by blank the number of months in a year by the number of years. if I tell you we are compounding monthly for some certain number of years, you need to multiply those numbers together. For example, if I want the exponent that represents 6 years, the exponents are blank and blank. So first you're going to have the exponent of 12 to represent the 12 months that you're compounding, and you're going to multiply it by 6 so that you can get the total. When blank together, I just said it, when multiplied together, the new exponent in this case would be 72. So if I am compounding monthly for 6 years, I would end up compounding 72 times, because that's 12 times a year for each of the 6 years, for a total of 72 times. Next, a decrease of 20% means we still have blank percent remaining. Understand that 100% is a whole. So if I decrease my whole amount by 20%, that means I still have 80% remaining. If I have a 20% decrease, the growth factor we will multiply is written as, remember that when we have a 20% decrease, we are not trying to find out how much we decreased by. We're trying to find out how much is remaining. And so if we have 80% remaining, then the growth factor we're multiplying by would be 0.8. This is 80% written as a decimal. So if I started out with 100 and I had a 20% decrease, I would multiply that 100 by 0.8 and find out that I still had 80 left. Next, if we have 24% annual interest, but it's compounded monthly, we need to blank the annual interest by blank. What we need to do is we need to divide the annual interest by 12, because there are 12 months in a year, then blank it to blank to get our growth factor. So we're going to take the 24% interest that is annual interest. We're going to divide that 24 by 12 to get the monthly interest. Then we're going to add to 1, because 1 will represent maintaining the current amount, and adding the 24% divided by 12 will add the additional monthly interest. To find our exponent, we blank the number of years by blank. Again, if we're trying to go from monthly or from yearly to monthly, we multiply the number of years by 12. This will tell us how many times to compound it monthly to get the right number of compounds in a certain number of years. After calculating the exponential part, so remember, once we have our exponential expression written, order of operations says we do the exponent first. So you'll take your growth factor and you'll take it to the exponent of your new input. After you calculate this exponential part, we need to multiply by the blank. We need to multiply this by the starting amount, also known as the y-intercept. Growth factors are the numbers blank and exponent. So when you look at an exponential expression, you have three parts. You have the starting amount, you have the growth factor, and you have the input. And the growth factors are the numbers with an exponent. The number without the exponent will be your starting amount. The number with an exponent will be your growth factor. If the growth factor is blank than 1, the amount is increasing. So when you find that number that has the exponent, if that number is greater than 1, the amount is increasing. Because now that 1 is maintaining the current amount and anything else is causing it to increase. On the other hand, if the growth factor is blank than 1, the amount is decreasing. So, for this one, if the growth factor is less than 1, the amount is decreasing. So, if you have multiplied by 0 point something, that is exponential decay, and your amount is decreasing. If you were to look at the growth factor and it were something like 1.05, then that is increasing by blank percent. We'll take your decimal point, move it to the right 2 places. The 1 is maintaining the current amount. The 0.05 is increasing by 5%. While a growth factor of 0.95 is decreasing by blank percent. Well, remember that 1 is the whole. So if you subtract 0.95, you have 0.05. And when I move that decimal point to the right 2 spots, that tells me I have decreased by 5%. So if it is 0.05 larger than 1, it's a 5% increase. If it is 0.05 less than 1, then it is a 5% decrease. If you are given the expression 1.23 times 3 to the power of x, if I have points at 2a and 5b, the value of a is blank and the value of b is blank. Well, if I know what x is, I can substitute that in for x, and when I solve the expression, it will give me my y value. So if I have 3 squared, that's 9. Now if I multiply that by 1.23, I find out that a is 11.07. Now if I look at b, the x value with b is 5. So if I have 3 to the power of 5, and now I multiply that by 1.23, b is 298.89. Now, if I wanted to know the value of b divided by a, I could simply put these in a calculator, and 298.89 divided by 11.07, my answer is 27. But what I want you to notice, if I were to use b minus a, or the x values of b minus a, this would be 3 to the power of 5 minus 2, which equals 3 to the power of 3, which is 27. So when I'm multiplying by the same starting amount, the ratio of the second y value to the first y value will be the growth factor to the power of the difference between the x values. And the last thing I want to make sure that you understand, linear functions grow by blank the same amount each time. A linear function adds the same amount each time. That's what creates the straight line on a graph. Exponential functions grow by blank the same amount each time. Exponential functions are multiplying. the same amount each time. Blank functions will always eventually outgrow blank functions. While they might start out lower and they might start slower, exponential functions will always eventually outgrow linear functions. You would rather have your savings account grow exponentially. Your money will always end up at a higher amount if it is growing exponentially than if it is growing linearly. Now, these are all the main things you need to understand to do well on the test Monday. If you have any questions about any of this, you can use class time to ask for clarification. You can go and do some of the con modules that we've been working on, or you can go back and re-watch the lesson videos to see how I worked the practice problems. But make sure you are ready to do well on the test Monday because your test averages count for half your grade.